April 26th, 1945. The closing days of World War II. On that day, a German intelligence officer known only as Walter H. surrendered to Colonel Hank Reed of General George Patton's 2nd Cavalry. As the Americans sorted through the papers of this captured spy, they saw, strangely enough, photos of horses. Beautiful, beautiful horses. The German spy told Reed that the Nazis had undertaken a project to capture some of the best horses from all over Europe, thoroughbreds, Arabians, and even the famed white Lipizzaner stallions of Vienna's Spanish riding school. What was their intent? Why did the Nazis want horses? Well, we're not far removed from horses in war, still in World War II. The intent of the Nazis had been to create, if you will, a master Aryan breed of horse for the master Aryan soldier, a super horse for super soldiers. Well, the spy told them that those horses, some 600 in number, were stabled just 21 miles over the border into Czechoslovakia in a small town called Hostau. Now, what made the situation extremely dire is that because of the Yalta Agreement, Czechoslovakia belonged to the Soviets. Germany, that part of Germany, belonged to the Americans. Moreover, between Hostau and where these spies were at, there was all this no man's land filled with all kinds of hostile forces loyal to the German army. If they went after those horses, they would fight all the way there and all the way back. Colonel Reed could not make that decision with so much at stake, considering that it could be an international incident. He radioed General Patton and told him the situation, and Patton's response was reported to be, quote, "Get them and make it fast." The operation was laid out, and it was named Operation Cowboy. Walter H. sent a note to the farm and informed the farm of the situation and that they were going to try to negotiate the transport of the horses to safety across the border into Germany. Now, why was this situation so dire in the first place? Well, here's what, it's hard to, okay. Might as well just tell it to you straight. The Germans did not want those horses falling into the hands of the Russians. Why? Because the Russians had already proven, first, that none of the POWs stationed there would be spared alive. Second of all, the Russian forces were only 60 miles out of Hostau and away from those horses. They had run into previous horses before, Lipizzaners, those beautiful stallions. The ones that were too spirited to be controlled, they shot them and left them lie. The others were turned into beasts of burden. The German officers in charge of those horses feared that the horses would either be killed or turned into steaks to feed the hungry Russian army. The situation? We have to get them out. We have to get the horses out. And that became Operation Cowboy. How do you take now 600 horses and drive them 131 miles across into the German border through a war zone? Moreover, to make it even more difficult, it was the season of the year when the mares were dropping colts. Some of those colts were too young to drive, the mares too far along with foal to be driven. So the situation became, Colonel Hank Reed selected Tom Stewart, Captain Tom Stewart, to head the mission. The last thing Stuart was told as he left to go to the horses was, "You don't have to go," meaning this is a suicide mission. They got back to the stud farm, and to make a long story short, there they encountered a number of overworked, desperate POWs held by the Germans. And now began the effort. They converted old army trucks to transport horses, and they loaded up those of the most delicate health in the worst condition. And after several days of getting prepared, finally they were ready to go. And by that time, the Red Army was closing in on Hostau. Captain Stuart described that they went out of this side of Hostau, and the Red Army came in right behind them, and they turned into a face-off. And Colonel Hank Reed faced the Russian commander. You see the situation? The Americans are out of their depth and out of their land. And they've come after those horses, which technically belong to the Russians. And Colonel Reed faced the Russians and said, "Just remember, our weapons are still loaded." Meaning, if you try to take those horses, you're going to have a fight. For some reason, the Russians backed down. With the horses that could be loaded in trucks, they did. But with the great bulk of the herd still able to be driven, you put the guys in jeeps who don't know sickum about a horse, and they fall in behind on the road to drive the herd. Captured POWs, Cossack prisoners, Americans, Captain Stuart, and others that are horse savvy mounted up on some of the stallions and began the drive out of Hostau towards the German border. And sure enough, they hadn't gone far when they ran right into enemy fire. And before all of it was through and the smoke cleared, 2 Americans lost their lives in fighting for those beautiful horses. It wasn't just the saving of a herd that was at stake. It was virtually the annihilation of a breed. Nevertheless, they made it through. And they reached the safety of Mansbach, Germany, where the Lipizaners, the famed performing horses, still carry on to this day. It would cost 2 American soldiers and a great deal of time and effort. But was it worth it? When it was over, the breed was saved and brought back from the brink of annihilation. In summing it all up, the tough, hardened Virginian, Colonel Hank Reed, summed it up best. He said, quote, "We were so tired of death and destruction. We just wanted to do something beautiful." End of quote.